my name is Carol Bull, and I'm part of a group of Acton artists known as the Acton Open Studios. Our Open Studios will be coming up this fall, October 22nd and 23rd, and you will see signs all over town showing you where these studios are, and there will be various types of maps, such as the one I'm holding, for you to pick up at our sponsors' places. Today we're going to go into some of these open studios and take a look at the art making process. We think you'll be interested in what is happening in the art scene in Acton. So don't forget, after we see these artists in their studios, that we will be having open studios in October 22nd and 23rd. We hope to see you then. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cynthia DeRost, and this is my flower garden. I'm a watercolor painter. I live in South Acton, and I first started painting outdoors. It was my feeling about being in nature and a meditative process, and I love painting outside, and I love painting nature. And I've been in the Open Studios since it began 14 years ago. It was sponsored by the Beat magazine, and it was an open studio from Acton to Boston, actually Groton to Boston. And I'm an impressionistic painter, and the Open Studios has offered me a great venue to meet people in Acton and meet people outside of Acton and come into my studio home and see the kind of work I do. I also teach, and I meet a lot of people that way, but I like the interaction the Open Studio provides for the community and for just the artists in the community, making art part of our community. Right now I'm painting the flowers in the garden. I'm adding sort of my impressionistic touch. The first part of the painting that you see was done wet on wet and wet on dry, and by that I'll just show you some techniques that I'm using. I'm sort of inventing the garden over again too, because you'll see the garden looks one way, but my painting looks another. Mixing some. Right now I'm trying to decide what I should do in the left-hand corner of the picture, because I've got all this white space. So I'm thinking I'm just going to invent some flowers over here. So I'll look at the flowers in the garden and demonstrate a wet on wet technique to do some of the lilies. And I'm going to get some, the lilies are beautiful colors. They're sort of a russet. They're also oh, you can't hear me. The lilies are a beautiful color. They're sort of a russet. There's a bright yellow. There's a peach. There's one that's sort of a combination of those two. So I'm looking for those colors and mixing them in my palette. And I'm going to start in this corner and invent something over here that isn't. So right now I'm using some water, and then I'm going to make this sort of russet color. Whoops. And it's going to drip a lot, which is one thing about working outside, you don't often know what's going to happen. Sometimes it's the bugs get on the paint, or the breeze comes along and the easel falls over, but it's all a lot of fun. You can see it dripping now, and I forgot to bring in something to wipe it up, so I'm going to wipe it up with the brush. And I'm going to start putting some greens in. which is, you know, painting is a lot of fun. You learn about mixing color, you learn about how things are going to react to the paper. I would also say that I was a colorist. I like color. It's not dark enough. I need some more color in here. Oh, there it is, dark. And as a watercolorist, you have to learn to work with the happy accidents. You have to learn to work with the drips. So I'm trying to get this to work for me. And the color in there is this creamy color in the center. One of the things I've studied in painting is Monet's technique. I kind of like set colors next to each other. I like the way that works. Sometimes they do flow into each other because I'm not using oils like Monet, but I do like the approach of dropping one color next to the other. Cerulean blue in here, I think. And then I have to stand back and look at it because I don't know if this is working. I'm so much on top of it. Maybe it's working. I need another color in there. I think I'll use some lavender. So right now I'm going to repeat some colors that I have on the other side. One of the things that I think hasn't been happening in the open studios is more demonstrations. So this is kind of making me think ahead to when people come to do some demonstrating while they're here, because then they'll get to actually see the process like you're getting to see on the camera. Right now I'm puzzling where to go next, which is maybe some dark background. I don't know what I'm going to do with all this space in here yet, but I want to make a pathway. I want to lead the eye up into the painting, so I may put something else here. I've been thinking about I have a bird bath over on the other side, and I've been thinking about putting that in the painting too, but I don't know yet. But I hope you all come to the open studios and get to see more of these demonstrations and more of the artists. We have quite a few people in our group, and we have a great time, and we want you all to come. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to my studio. It's Maple Street Studio in Maynard. I'm one of the artists from the Acton Open Studios, which will be held in October. And I usually show my work with Cynthia DeRust, who is at 1 Martin Street over in Acton. And we've been doing this together for a long time. Originally, we were part of the Middlesex Beat Open Studios, which was a magazine devoted to the arts in the Middlesex County, and they did a fabulous job of having an open studio for all of Middlesex County. But they went out of business, and a whole bunch of us from the area decided that we would continue the process. So we've been going on for maybe 6-7 years on our own. And we all take turns doing various parts of what goes into advertising and getting the word out and doing the publicity. Well, anyway, what I'd like to do today is give you a sense of how I go about my work and just do some little simple exercises that you may have done yourself in school when you were in high school. But it's a preliminary that can work to larger things. So if you'll follow me to the table here, I'll begin. Both a hand builder with clay and also some throw on the wheel. And I like to go back and forth between the two processes because it's very interesting and I like the variety that entails. This is a hand-built bowl done from a pinch pot, which was very large to begin with. It had about 7 pounds worth of clay. And it's called a broom pot because the broom handle is put into the center. Now, if you ever started working with clay, one of the things they start is a little pinch pot. And this is the same process. You can make the opening and then round it out. And then for this pot, every day I have to bring it up from the inside. With the pinch pot, you can bring it up from the inside by just turning it around and thinning out the sides. This one takes more time because every day you have to bring up what you can, let it dry a little, continue bringing it up till it's thin enough. One of the things you can do with the pot is add texture, which this one has combs through it. This you can add, here's a nice meat tenderizer, add this, and then once you start working from the outside, you are making the area grow larger. And you can see how that works. The top of this is the coil, and that's another method people do. They can build up a pot with a coil. I've just thrown, basically the old coil method. Roll it in your hand and then start rolling it out on the table. And as you can see, I just put a coil around here, but you can also build up a pot this way as well. And this is one of the old methods. The Native Americans used the whole idea of the coil, building up and working it in so that you eventually get a large pot. The third method is the use of the slab. And I've rolled one out a little bit here, not fully, made it circular. And I have a large rolling pin here. And I like to put texture in my pieces. And one of the textures, we can try to start this one. Here it is. I use a lot of my grandmother's doilies. It's a great thing for putting patterns in clay. And continue to roll it out. And then what you can do next is pick up a form. Okay, I'll lift this up so you can see it. You can see there's a very nice pattern in there. One of the pieces I've done are these garden rocks with that pattern. So you can make shapes, sculpture shapes. These are for gardens and people enjoy using them there. And the other thing you can also do are plates. I usually turn this upside down and then start beating it. And let it dry there, not too long because the clay shrinks. And at some point you could remove it and you could make it much larger, obviously. But that's one of the ways. So those are the 3 ways: the pinch pot, the coils, and the slab. And now for the wheel work, which I will move over to the wheel on this side. Well, this is my Brent wheel. I like this wheel a lot. One of the things, I've already put a piece of clay on here. I had to wedge it ahead of time, which is very much like bread baking. You although it's just a little different of wedging the clay. You have to get all of the air out of it, otherwise the piece can blow up in the kiln if there's one tiny bubble here or there. But anyway, what I've done is put a large amount of clay on the wheel head, and usually I make a lot of tea bowls, and I usually make this off the hump. This is what this is called. So I just wanted to demonstrate this. One of the first things you could, make sure the clay adheres very well. And then you don't have to center the entire bowl of clay, but you want to take a piece of clay at the top and make sure that's centered. And I usually bring up the clay a little bit. I'm continuing to make sure that there's no air in it. I really like working in clay. It's when you get into it, it's somewhat of a meditative process. You're really listening to the clay and which way it's going to go. What I've done now is formed the outside, so I know where things are going to head. The next thing I'm going to do is open the clay. And I've managed to make a little cup form here. Continue to keep it just a little moist, not too much. What you want to do is to continue to thin it out. Make sure it stays centered, and I usually go back. I slow the wheel down at a certain point. I very much like the Asian potters and what they do. There's a very spontaneous feeling for a lot of their pots. So I've been studying a lot of photographs in various journals. And I've been fortunate in that I've had a couple of teachers in the past. One of them, Makoto Yabe, who was born in Japan and knew all the Japanese techniques. And he was a teacher of mine for many years till he passed away. I really miss him in this life. Anyway, what happens is at some point you get to the point where you feel you've got the tea bowl ready to go. What I like to do sometimes is put a thumb print in here. So I hold the clay, and it's a way to hold the teacup. Next, I want to cut this off. Whoops. I cut this off from the wheel head. Lift it, and I can put it on this board here to dry. One of the things I do want to mention before looking at some pots is once you're finished throwing the piece and it dries to leather hard, you need to trim the bottom and make a foot. And then the piece has to be dried all together before you put it in a kiln. I have an electric kiln outside this particular room. And the kiln is fired to cone 04, or between cone 04 and cone 06, which tells you the temperature range, and that's about 1900 degrees. And it's a lot of hours of firing. And when it comes out, you then call it bisqueware, and this is a nice pink shade to it. This is stoneware. And this is the point that you could start applying glazes. Different glazes that I've used in the past. You can see some of my work here. I'll show you some of the tea bowls that I've done. This is for holding it. This is more of the Japanese technique. Here's one. This is a green Don Wright's glaze. It's named after the potter who devised the formula. I've done large bowls, and you can see here I've done some carving around the outside. And a tenmoku, which is a brown glaze, a Japanese glaze inside, and then a bit of green on top. It's probably the Don Wright's white on top, because you put two different glazes together, and you can go from the green that you see here to this one. I also do a lot of platters. These are hand-built, similar to the method I showed earlier, where I do a large circle, give a little bit of texture to it, put it on top of a really old wooden bowl and just wait a little bit till it dries. I then trim the foot by hand. So this is hand built. So you can see I do a variety of things. Here again, here's another bowl I've done. And sometimes I like to put little features in them so that there's, and they can be used as paperweights, or they can be just a design element in the bowl. I've also done square platters. This is hand built again. And I always like to do some kind of texture. And then the glazes do their own work. You never know what you're going to get. You try and get, you think one thing and then something else happens. And I kind of like that because there's a mystery to it and a surprise when the kiln is open. So these things are fired twice. And the second firing is the glaze fire. So I think I've given you a little sense of some of the elements that can happen in clay, and I invite you to my studio at Maple Street. You can find my website, you can find my address on the website, the Acton Open Studios website. People come here all the time for gifts. And I will also be at the Acton Open Studios in October with Cynthia DeRoast at 1 Martin Street. So please do come and visit us. And even if you just want to see the work, it's wonderful to go to all the artists and see the painters, the watercolorists, the sculptors, and the metal workers and the glass workers. It's just a fun day and people enjoy it. Many people come. So thanks for visiting 10 Maple Street and hope to see you in October.
Hello, I'm Mary Lou Chapsky, and a long time ago, I won't tell you how long ago, I received a BFA at Massachusetts College of Art, and my mother was also an art teacher, so she instructed me a bit. You know, Mother, you don't always pay attention, but I sort of do my own thing. I like to paint in all mediums. Today I'm going to work in some acrylics, and I like acrylics because you can paint over them. I started this, I don't like some of it, so we're going to change it. And you can do that with oils, but oils take so long to dry. Acrylics dry faster. If you want them to stay moist, you use an acrylic medium. But today I would like them to dry faster, and you use water. So I also like to use strange utensils. I like to work with a sponge. So I'm going to try and cause out some of these waves with a bit of a sponge. And I have blue out here. I think I'm going to put some green. Also do some mixing with my colors. And I worked on the rocks again this morning. The rocks were not that high. They are now higher. And I went to Rockport this past weekend and noticed some things about the waves that I wanted to incorporate, a little different than the way I had done it. And, one thing about the ocean, it is so different in so many different moods. And I actually like to do my interpretation of what an ocean looks like. I don't always, in fact I seldom, have a picture in front of me. Sometimes I will go outdoors and paint, I guess they call it in air, but I do on site. But more paint. You use a lot of acrylic paint. It uses up much faster than watercolor. artist who has to be in the mood too. If it's not, I don't feel like it, I don't do it. But I like to mix mediums. In fact, I've about decided that when I'm through with this, I am going to do some highlighting with oil and oil on it, because the oils make good, well, the word I'm looking for, they bring forward parts of it that you want to see more. They give more depth to it, more feeling. And I don't always do that, but I think I'm going to do that on this one. I sometimes even do collages on top if I get through painting. If something I like and a different type of paper will enhance it, then I use it. I stick it on. I have done collage oceans with just collage. I paint paper and tear it up and put it on top of the acrylics. So it's all different. As you can see, my studio does double duty as my kitchen. I'm not quite into having my own big space. But when that dries, I'll do some more on top of that one. But, I also like to wait. I work on one and then I leave it alone and then I come back later and do some more on it. So this is going to be it for this time, and then I will go back and do some more on it. So I hope you will come to our open studios. Oh, this is an acrylic. This also is an acrylic that I did. I do all different types. These two, this is a watercolor and this is a Also watercolor, but one traditional, and that's a little less traditional. I like to do a little bit of everything, whatever the mood strikes me. I hope you've enjoyed what I've done and learned something.
I'm Fran Addison, and this is my home studio where I work. I focus on making Jewish ceremonial objects, also known as Judaica, used in the home. And most of my pieces are one of a kind. I enjoy incorporating antique elements and found objects with my work. And I have a few examples to show before I actually demonstrate. In a local antique shop, I found these antique clock gears. And when I saw it, right away I thought dreidel. Now a dreidel is a spinning top that's used at the holiday of Hanukkah. And you play a game and you spin it, and I will show you what the finished product looked like. I brought it home and I polished it on my buffing wheel, very shiny brass. And then I took my jeweler's saw with this very small blade and I sawed out 4 Hebrew letters from pewter. And each Hebrew letter stands for something you do in the game. And as you can see, I think I can demonstrate how well this spins. It spins great, it makes a perfect dreidel, and here I'm incorporating the antique clock gear, and I was able to find 6 of these, so this is a limited edition of 6. Another piece that I did using antiques was this wine cup, also known as a Kiddush cup. And originally, this goblet had a glass stem and a glass base, which had broken off. And I thought that this cobalt blue cut glass was just too beautiful to get rid of. So I thought, well, I can make my own stem and base. So I did. And the wire here started out as pewter wire on this coil. And I cut the lengths, I twisted them, soldered them at the base, formed the hemisphere, and then from the base I sawed out the Hebrew lettering that's part of the blessing for the wine, which is Borei Peri Hagafen. And on the bottom of the cup I cut out a star so that the person opposite you, sitting opposite you, would see something special on the base of the cup. So this is a one-of-a-kind piece. As I said, most of my pieces are one of a kind. However, I do repeat some of my designs. And one such piece is this Miriam's cup. Now, just to give you a little background, Miriam was the sister of Moses. And as the story goes, as the Jews were wandering in the desert, Miriam, through dancing and playing her timbrels or her tambourine, was able to summon wells of water to help sustain the Jews as they wandered. And she also was a source of spiritual nourishment. Her words of comfort gave the Jews hope when they were losing faith. So to honor Miriam and all of our women ancestors during the holiday of Passover, and often during the Sabbath, to honor women, we fill this not with wine, as in the Kiddush cup, but with water, to symbolize the water that she summoned. And I like to use blue glass because of the water association. The metal here is pewter, and what I do is I have patterns for my lettering and for the Miriam that I draw and I make copies of. I keep in a file. I cut them out, I rubber cement my pattern to the metal. And to cut out the metal, the first thing that you need to do is to use a center punch to mark where you're going to drill the hole. Now in this piece, I actually will use the holes as design elements in the letters. So the first thing I do with my center punch is I press down. There's a spring inside of here, and I press down and it makes the little indentation. Then I have my drill. This is called a flexible shaft, and it has a chuck here which holds different bits. I'm going to use this little drill bit that I will put in the end of the chuck. This is the key which will tighten the chuck or loosen it, whatever the case may be if you're taking out the piece. So this can be used for drilling holes, or you can also use this little attachment which is used for polishing small places that are hard to get to with the big buffing wheel. Now, whenever you use a power tool, you always protect your eyes because you don't know if a piece of metal will go flying or the drill bit can break off, and you want to protect your eyes. So these are my protective goggles. And I have a block of wood here I'm going to rest my piece on. And this might remind you of the dentist office because it's kind of like what it sounds like. So I drill the hole. There's one. I'll drill a few more. Drill in each letter. Okay, so I've drilled my holes. Can take my glasses off now, my goggles. And now it's time to saw. And this has very teeny tiny teeth on it, which you can't see, but you can certainly feel them. And I'm going to unscrew the base, and I'm passing the saw blade through the hole that I just drilled in my metal. And the pewter, by the way, as you see here, I give a very high polish to, so it looks like sterling silver. The lovely thing about pewter is it doesn't tarnish the way silver does. And most people, or a lot of people, when they think of pewter, think that pewter has to be that dull gray. And it used to be that dull gray color, and that's because they used to put lead in pewter, and of course they don't do that anymore. So you can get that very high polish. So with a gentle up and down motion, I'm going to saw out a letter. And it really takes very little pressure, especially in pewter. Pewter is extremely soft, unlike brass, which is the other metal I use, which is much harder. And saw blades break very easily if you push them too hard in the brass. And they also dull faster, so that can cause breakage as well. So now I just cut out the inside, which forms one of the Hebrew letters for the name Miriam. And then to cut out the outside, I will put the saw blade back in the frame. And this is the same way that jewelers saw their jewelry, using this exact same kind of frame. And I've had this frame for 30 plus years. They last forever. So I'm just sawing around the perimeter of the letter. Okay. And I'll just get one more side. So now I've completely sawn out the letter, and I can peel off my pattern, which comes off fairly easily since it was just rubber cemented on. And then I might take a file to just make sure the edges are completely straight. And then my next step after this would be to take it to the buffing wheel and polish it to a high polish, such as we have here. And this is the same letter. So that's how I saw out the letters. I sawed out my Miriam, which I have on my soldering table. For soldering, I have this great rotating table, so I can, move my heat all around to the different sides. When you solder, you need to use flux, which this is a combination of glycerin and sulfuric acid that I added to it, or hydrochloric acid. And that will help bite into the metal and keep it clean so that the solder will flow. Now, pewter melts at a very low temperature, so it's quite easy to melt your piece when you're soldering. So you have to be really, really careful. So I put a little flux on. I'm soldering one of these links to the Miriam that I will be able to attach the bells. So I did cut little tiny bits of solder. This is a spool of solder. And I just cut little tiny snippets. And with my tweezers, I'm going to pick one up and put it at the base of the link. Now I have actually the Miriam resting on a couple of bobby pins that are spread apart, and that's to elevate the piece a little bit so that the heat from the torch will be able to circulate under the metal to help the solder flow. And so this is my torch, and there are different kinds of soldering with torches. This is not the hottest kind. Welders use 2 tanks, oxygen and acetylene, so they get a really, really hot flame. This is just a tank of acetylene, and then the air will mix through these little holes. And to turn on the torch, I have what's called a striker. And this striker has a little tiny piece of flint here. And when you move it across, here, I don't know if this shows up, but you can, let's do a little better this way, get a spark. And when you get that spark and the gas is coming out of the torch, you get a flame. So let's give it a try. Hopefully I can do this without melting the piece. So I'm lighting the torch. Well, I'm hoping to light the torch. Let's try. Nothing always works perfectly. There we go. So there's my flame. This is the kind of flame you want. See the blue triangle? The tip of the blue is the hottest part of the flame. So, and I'm going to take an old dental tool just in case the solder might move. I can sort of poke it back into place. So let me move these so you can see a little better. So I'm just going to heat it gently at the base of that ring. Hopefully the solder will flow. Now see, the solder did move a little. I'm going to push it back to the ring. And so the flux is bubbling. That's a good sign. And the solder just flowed. I just turned the torch off. And I'll just wait for it to cool for just a minute. It cools pretty quickly because you didn't have to heat it. I didn't have to heat it that much. If this had been brass, I would have had to heat it much longer. But here, you see, I've got the ring soldered on her hand now, on the tambourine part. So I will be able to attach the bells next. So this is an example of a piece, as I mentioned, that I can repeat. I have some other work here that I put out behind me, and let's see, that I did. These candlesticks, I'll just show you, one of a kind. The middle part here actually used to be a brandy glass, like this part right here. And there's actually still glass inside the metal here, inside the silver. When I got these, the silver stems were kind of bent and in really bad shape, so I cut them off, got rid of them, turned it upside down, made my own base, and with my jeweler's saw, in Hebrew, I sawed out the words Shabbat Shalom, which means Sabbath peace. And I have that on each candlestick. And then on the bottom, again, I did that star. I like to have something special on the bottom of my pieces. So again, one of a kind Sabbath candlesticks used on Friday at the beginning of the Sabbath. And let's see. This is a Hanukkah menorah that I did, also one of a kind. The back piece was part of a trivet, and I had cut the trivet in half, used it as a back piece, put it vertically, and then I did the brass work on the base for the candles, the 8 nights of Hanukkah. And what else? This is a piece, it's called a tzedakah box. Tzedakah means charity, and it's traditional on Friday evening at the beginning of the Sabbath to put spare change in a charity box to save for your favorite charity. So I made this in the form of a house shape, to sort of symbolize the first place where you learn the meaning of charity. And I cut out from the brass the Hebrew lettering, which says tzedakah, meaning charity. And then I cut the green stained glass, and inside, I don't know if it shows up on camera, but there's a tree of life, a brass tree of life on the inside of the piece. And so you would actually put your change or your bills in here, and then when it comes time to empty it, on the bottom I have a rubber stopper to take out. So this I made, completely from scratch. And another piece from scratch, starting with flat sheet metal, pewter, these Sabbath candlesticks I call Sabbath roses. It's traditional for men to bring home to their wives on Friday evenings a bouquet of flowers. So this symbolizes that. So I hope that everybody can come to visit my studio, Open Studios, this year, October 22nd and 23rd. And I'd love to show you more of my work and more of how I create.
We hope you've enjoyed taking that tour around town to see some of Acton's open studios. And we want you to remember that we will be open on October 22nd and October 23rd, Saturday and Sunday, from 12 to 5 each day. Look for the signs around town, and many more artists will be welcoming you into their studios. It should be a great weekend. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to meet you that weekend.